My name is Kenneth-Allen M. Callahan. Um, you can just call me Kenneth. I am currently a student at Los Angeles City College, though I'm taking classes throughout my college district, so it's my home college, but I'm kind of just jumping from place to place. Um, Heading out to UCLA in the fall, and that's right around the corner, so excited for that. This is my third year of college, and yeah, that's pretty much me. A multitude of reasons. Young organizers kind of we get the chance to see the world from a new lens. If you're older and you've been in the work for maybe 20, 30 years, 40 years in some cases, then you came up in a particular era. So let's say you grew up during the Watts riots, or maybe your parents or you were on the tail end of the civil rights movement. That's kind of where your mindset and how you um, view society or view social events happening. So even though you're growing throughout your time, um, you can tell that a lot of them are kind of fixed to that previous mindset or the beliefs that people had in the past, and that's good because they can give perspective that's unique to that era, but they can't really, fully adapt to the new generation of people. A lot of them, they're always trying to keep up with the times, but as somebody who's young, who's currently in the times, I don't really have to adjust it because I'm forced to be in it, right? Which I guess it's like a generational thing. So I guess that's one. Two, we're a lot more open to change and development because in many cases, I don't know if you would say that um, that's a valid argument, but because a lot of younger people, their minds aren't fully developed or matured enough to just be like, okay, I can settle with this or I can settle with that. We're more open to just being like, um, okay, this needs to change. And I've had conversations with people where they had some pretty wild, um, I'd say, well, not wild, but really strange beliefs that were really unhinging and they weren't willing to change because they were so um, adapted to their current, like what they grew up with. And the great thing about being young is that you have time, you have the ability to change and mold yourself more than you do when you're a lot older. And the last thing is I'd say is that we're everywhere and everybody looks for us. In addition to like the previous things, we're always ready to be, um, I guess, mentored, and we're always really ready and willing to be guided in a certain direction, which is not always the case with a lot of more mature people. So I'd say it's easier for us to be guided in a direction, which is kind of a double-edged sword because you can lead us to do great things, you can lead us to do terrible things, but at the end of the day, we're the ones who are kind of leading the vision that people cannot see. So that's why I'd say those are like some of the main things why young Black organizers need to do that. There's definitely the research aspect, looking at historical data. There were some parts of the passage. These are the parts that I enjoyed the most, um, where we're given a database and we're shown how to actually look for the information within the database. And even though it would be a lot more difficult for us to just go in there and like search through all the data, because for some of us, ain't nobody got time for that, right? I understand that. But some of the information is curated in a way where it's understandable and it's easy to present. And a lot of just using that information itself is like that's game changing. So we have the storytelling aspect, which is another thing that's amazing from the class, the ability to tell stories or utilize them to create a narrative. But then the um, research-based aspect, where we're using the actual evidence as really the support for the stories that we're telling. So it's the strange mix where the evidence of the issues, the empirical evidence, isn't really the driving factor, but the story itself is the basis, while the evidence is just a support as to why something needs to happen. So I could say that um, or you can have the evidence that 50% of Black folks in Los Angeles are either unemployed or underemployed or something like that. But then you could have the story of somebody who's going through underemployment, somebody who doesn't have a job, or who's struggling to find a job. And because of that, um, their family and their personal lives are suffering. And it's like this weird mix between, or not really weird, but it's like this kind of, it's this interesting mix between storytelling and fact-based evidence that you kind of combine, and that's something I really enjoy um, applying or learning about in the class that I'm currently trying to implement into my time at the Freedom Fellowship. So those are, I guess that's one of the skills that I learned there that I'm actually applying right now. So yeah, I think the next generation of Black organizers need to be prepared to um, obviously organize, but to mobilize people. From what I've seen and speaking with professionals in like different environments, not just within labor and education, but just in general, um, there's always an effort to organize people, which there's a lot of people who are really great at organizing people, but there's I feel like a lot of us fall short in terms of both mobilizing one and then the implementation, which is another thing that's historically has been a massive issue as far as any social movements. Um, we can organize people, and in many cases, we can actually mobilize people to get these things done and to have our demands heard and realized. But um, the mobilization is kind of something that a lot of people struggle in, and then the implementation, how we properly get into practice the things that we fight for, those two aspects are some of the most lacking. And I'd say that if anything, the next generation should be prepared. um, I'd say, yeah, maybe less, obviously more mobilization, but primarily the implementation piece. How are we actually going to get these things into practice once we've got them done? Because after we get it, then we're like, yay! And then everybody just kind of leaves. But that's not always the case, because when we leave, we'll have this political pressure on them. And then next thing you know, after we get like what is it, 20 to 50 million dollars that's supposed to be going to schools and such that the county has, but the county is not putting it into anything, and then they're mad at us for not, implementing it when it's their job to implement the money. So implementation is probably what we need to um, focus on developing as far as what I've seen. I would say that I want the world to know that I have undeniable African roots, because if I'm making this like a whole worldwide like declaration, then I'm kind of also calling out to the people in Africa or blacks all around the world, you know, where I'm saying to everybody, we all come from the same place. So even though there might be division between us, or you may think that um, black people in America or are like kind of the scum of the earth, or if we like you think one way about us or another, like there's conflict between different African peoples, then my declaration to them would just be, we're all people who came from the same place, and even though there's conflict between us, at the end of the day, we all share a similar history, and we're all family. So even though it's like an incredibly cheesy thing, oh, everybody love each other. It's incredibly cheesy, but I would say that if there's anybody really choosing to fight us or pin us against each other, which there have historically been a lot of people who have pinned us against each other. Instead of us fighting amongst ourselves, why don't we band together and fight those who oppress us? So um, we have the same roots, and that's what I would say to the world. Being out there, being in the community, being where others are. Obviously, you have the example of just um, being out there and like doing the work. You can be on the street. You can be on the streets. You can be in these meetings, talking and making their presence known. But there's nothing like going out there to where the people are and then just showing them this is what you can do. Um, and maybe not in every time I'm going to be here directly for you or like directly supporting you, which in many cases we are. But even just using yourself as an example of what you can do to inspire others. Like, I believe it was no, not yesterday. It was Monday. We were talking to what is it, Amir Whitaker, which is the dude who kind of inspired um, a lot of the police reform policies that are currently being implemented in high schools and K through 12 schools throughout California, because he like brought up some really crazy statistics saying that though like so many schools don't have any counselors or nurses or any of that, a lot of them have police, and just by him bringing that information to people's attention, then he sparked this entire like statewide movement on, how are we going to actually get students counselors? How are we actually going to get them nurses on campus? One of our fellows was actually in a situation where she needed a nurse at her school, but because they didn't have a nurse, she woke up to a police officer supporting her, trying to help her when that wasn't his job in the first place. So just that, right? Just sitting in a room with a person who can like inspire the government to invest like what is it, $5-6 billion into like a piece of legislation. Um, that's crazy. That's inspiring. So just letting people know you're there, you exist as a human. I think that's one of the most inspiring things that you can do as an organizer and inspiring another generation of organizers.